Hey guys, Matthew here from My First Fish Tank in collaboration with Marine Depot. This video may cause your mind to explode with a pure overload of information. We're talking beginner saltwater fish, fish disease, fish medication, drip acclimation, and quarantine tanks. It's a crazy amount of information, but luckily myfirstfishtank.com has beginner guides, beginner guide to saltwater fish, beginner guide to saltwater fish disease, beginner guide to saltwater fish medications that are so much more in depth. And obviously I made them, so I think they're great, but I really do think that they're the best beginner guides out there. With that being said, let's get to the video. What makes a beginner fish a beginner fish? The first characteristic of a beginner fish is they're hardy. They're just known to be resilient and to do well in a saltwater aquarium. The second is inexpensive. Not to say that all expensive fish are not good beginner fish, but when you're starting out, if you're gonna make mistakes, you might as well pick up an inexpensive fish. Number three, easy to find. Some fish are just more common, whether they're captive bred or there's just so many of them in the wild. The next one is easy to acclimate. For some reason, there are some fish out there that acclimate really well, but there are some fish that for some reason have a difficulty adjusting and they just don't do well. The next one is ships well. Regardless of where you get your fish from, unless you raise it yourself, it's gonna have to be shipped. And generally that means putting it in a plastic bag, putting it in a box, shipping it across the country, across the world. So you want a fish that can make it through that process without too much stress. Next up is captive bred. Captive bred breeding programs are growing, but we haven't figured out how to breed all kinds of fish. But if you can get a captive bred fish, generally they accept pellet food, they're disease-free, and they tend to acclimate pretty darn well. Number 7 is small. There's nothing about a small fish that makes it necessarily a good beginner fish. The only thing that makes a small fish a good beginner fish is the fact that most beginners have small tanks, so a small fish goes in a small tank. Number 8 is peaceful. There are peaceful fish, semi-aggressive fish, and aggressive fish. Your best bet is going to be to choose a peaceful or semi-aggressive fish that can play well with others. Last but not least, the 9th characteristic of a beginner fish is a fish that accepts flake and pellet food. There are fish out there that are super duper picky and they require specialized diets. So why not get a fish that will accept almost any type of food? That way you know they're gonna be well fed and they're gonna survive. Tank requirements for beginner fish. The first has to do with size. If you get a 5 or 10 gallon tank, you're gonna be limited just to a couple fish. Filtration. If you have tons of filtration, if you have a lot of live rocks, ceramic media, macro, algae, protein skimmer, you're gonna be able to expand your bioload and have more fish. But if you just have a simple all-in-one system, you probably won't be able to have as many. Substrate. You don't need sand, as we talked about in a previous episode, but there are livestock that require sands. Hiding places, all fish need some place to feel secure. Some fish hide all day, others are out in the open all day. So make sure that when you're aquascaping, you provide enough nooks and crannies and caves so that even the most timid fish will have a place to rest and feel safe. Lighting. If you're just having a fowler tank, which is fish only with live rock, and you're not putting any corals, it doesn't really matter what kind of lighting you get. But if you want to plan ahead for corals, you're going to want to make sure you get a light that has enough intensity and par to be able to support the photosynthetic life in your tank. And the last tank requirement, which is super obvious, cycle your tank. How to choose a healthy fish. If you're buying from your local fish store, first ask them about quarantine procedures. Do they quarantine all their fish and treat them for 2 weeks? Number 2 is ask your fish store if you can purchase the item and then store it there for 2 weeks. Number 3, feed fish. Any local fish store of repute will feed the fish to see if they eat. If the fish eats, it's generally a good sign they're not too stressed and probably a decent fish. Number 4 is to buy captive bred fish whenever you can. Captive bred fish typically don't have any diseases, they acclimate well, and they almost always accept pellet or flake food. Number 5, researching the source. Some countries have really bad gathering practices where they use chemicals to catch the fish. So as much as you can, find out the source of your fish. Number 6 is observe fish behavior. There are some obvious signs of fish stress, and that's to be expected during the process. But if you see things such as flashing, a fish dashing against a rock, rapid breathing, or excessive hiding, those could all be signs that the fish is a little bit too stressed out and might not be a good purchase. The last thing you can do is inspect the fish for disease and injury. Things such as torn or frayed fins, white spots, white growths, rapid breathing. All of these are signs that your fish might not be healthy and might not survive. My top 10 beginner fish. The first tip I'm going to give you before I go into the top 10, put a mesh screen on the top of your tank, because a lot of the fish on this list and a lot of saltwater fish in general are jumpers. Fish number 1 on the list is, of course, the clownfish. There's over 30 recognized species, some of which can get really big and can be very aggressive. So I recommend getting the Percula or the Ocellaris clownfish. These fish are related to the damselfish, so they can be semi-aggressive, especially kept in small tanks. For a beginner, I would either pick up 1 or 2, that way you can have a mated pair. Fish number 2, Bangai or pajama cardinalfish. There's over 300 cardinalfish species, but the Bangai and pajama cardinalfishes are really good beginner fish. They're super peaceful, and you can get them in schools of 3 or more. Number 3 are firefish, also called dartfish. These are goby-like fish. They're super peaceful, except towards members of their own species, but you can often buy 2 as long as they're a mated pair. Number 4 is a yellow watchman goby. These are bottom dwellers. They're super peaceful, and they can pair up with various species of pistol shrimp, which is really cool seeing them share a burrow together. Beginner fish number 5 is the 6-line wrasse. Super gorgeous colors, smaller fish. They can be highly territorial and nip at other creatures, so just make sure you give them a wide enough berth. For beginner, I'd say just put 1 in your tank and make sure you have that mesh screen on, because wrasses are known jumpers. Fish number 6 on the list is either a flame or a long-nosed hawkfish. These are really fun to watch. They don't have a swim bladder, so they actually perch on the rocks or other things around your tank. Really peaceful, but they can be aggressive towards their own species. Number 7 is a blue-green chromis. Even though they're a damselfish, they can be relatively peaceful. They can live over 10 years, and they're great to have in schools. Fish number 8 on the beginner list is the azure damselfish. They can be semi-aggressive, so it's good to make sure they have a lot of hiding spaces. They're beautiful blue and yellow, and they live really well in schools. Fish number 9 on the beginner list is the coral beauty angelfish. I hesitate just a little bit to recommend this fish because it needs a larger tank, 60 to 70 gallons. They like to graze throughout the day, so make sure they have plenty of food, plenty of live rock to peck at. They're also one of the few angelfish that are captive bred, so if you can find one, they'll be a little bit more expensive, but they'll be super hardy. Just a word of caution, they can nip at your corals, so just watch them closely. Fish number 10 on the list is the royal gramma basslet. Super small, super colorful, super peaceful. They can attack members of their own species, but all around great beginner fish. I break fish disease down into 4 categories: parasitic, bacterial, fungal, and viral. Parasitic infections are probably the most common and pretty much the most deadly. A parasite is any sort of organism that lives on or in another organism and gets its food and sustenance at the expense of the host organism. The second category are bacterial bacterial infection. Bacterial infections can be either external or internal, and they often follow as a secondary infection to a parasitic infection. The tricky thing with bacterial infections is trying to figure out what type of bacteria is infecting your fish, because different antibiotics work differently with different bacteria. The third category is fungal infections, not super common in the saltwater hobby. They often appear as white cotton-like growths. The fourth and final category is viral, not common at all in the saltwater hobby, and there is no medication to treat it.
Well, I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
I keep trying to film, but this boat company back here, they won't shut up for like more than 30 seconds. You hear them? There are a ton of different parasitic fish diseases out there, but let's talk about the 4 most common. Number 1, and probably the most dreaded, is called marine ick, also called white spot disease, and please don't get mad at me, but I'm going to try to pronounce the scientific name. Are you ready? Here we go, I have to read it. Cryptocaryon irritans. All right, scientists, you can correct me below. Super, super common. It has a really long life cycle, so once it gets into your tank, it can be really difficult to get rid of. The parasite penetrates the skin and the gills, so even if you don't see anything, it can still be infected with marine ick. Really, copper is considered the gold standard treatment for marine ick. Number 2 is marine velvet, also called gold dust disease. It presents very, very similarly to marine ick, except the white spots are more round and they're smaller than marine ick. The scientific name is... Alright, here's the scientific name. Ready? Let's try it. It's... Amylodinium ocellatum. Amylodinium ocellatum? Is that close? It seems close. Marine velvet is way more deadly than marine ick, so by the time you usually spot it, it's almost always too late. Again, cupramine is the gold standard treatment. Number 3 are flukes. There's 13 different families of flukes. They're parasitic flatworms that feed on fish tissue, usually on the exterior of the fish. A freshwater dip can provide temporary relief, followed by Prasipro. That should take care of the problem. And the 4th most common parasitic is called clownfish disease, Brooklinella hostilis, or in the hobby we just call it Brook. It presents very, very similar to marine velvet, and really the best known treatment is using a formalin bath. Check out what these guys are doing right behind me. Look who came to bust up the fun party. Bacterial infections, they're usually the result of poor water quality or following some sort of parasitic infection. Antibiotics and a UV sterilizer are your best bet for treatment. Fungal infections, they're uncommon and they often appear as like a white fuzzy growth on the fins or the mouth or the body. Water change, various medications can help, such as malachite green, methylene blue, and then there's homeopathic cures such as API Pimafix and Melafix. Finally, we're talking viral infections. The most common are called lymphocytes. They look like white cauliflower looking growths, almost wart-like. There is no treatment, but they usually do resolve on their own. Common fish treatments, freshwater dips. It's the process of putting your saltwater fish into a container of fresh water for 3 to 5 minutes. The theory being that parasites hate the hyposalinity so much more than your fish that they will drop off and die, but it offers temporary relief from things, especially like flukes. Hyposalinity, not to be confused with a freshwater dip. Hyposalinity is a lengthy process that means that you put your fish into a hyposaline environment of 1.009 specific gravity for a period of several weeks. It's often used to treat marine ick and other parasites. The tank transfer method, it really only cures marine ick. It's the process of moving your fish from one sterile tank to another every 72 hours over a period of 2 weeks. Basically, you're getting ahead of the marine ick life cycle, thus killing it. A UV sterilizer can also be used. It kills only things that are free-floating bacterias, parasites, and algae. Moving on to common fish medications. First, you need to know the difference between reef safe and biofilter safe, because that's really important when deciding what medications to use. If a medication is reef safe, that means you can use it with your inverts. If a medication is biofilter safe, that means it's not going to harm your biological filtration, meaning it's not going to kill your nitrifying bacteria. Let's jump right in with anti-parasitics. The first one's API General Cure. It's an antibiotic and an anti-parasitic. It is biofilter safe, and it can be reef safe when combined with a binding agent like Seachem Focus. Number 2 is Hikari ProziPro. I use this all the time. It's an anti-worm treatment. It's great for flukes. It's biofilter and reef safe. Number 3 is a combination. It's Ruby, Reef, Rowley, and Kick Ick. I've actually used these, but some people say they don't work. They've actually worked for me. They can be used together. They treat velvet, flukes, ick, and Brooklynella. They are reef safe and biofilter safe, so you can use them in your display tank. Number 4 is Seachem Cupramine, probably the most widely recognized and effective treatment. It is highly toxic, and it must be used in a quarantine tank. It is not reef safe. It is not biofilter safe. It treats ick and velvet. Antibacterial medications, this is the hardest category bar none, because there are so many bacteria out there and so many different antibiotics, and they don't all work with each other. We need to first talk about gram-positive, gram-negative, and broad spectrum. There was a system called the Gram system. It was developed in 1882 by a Dutch bacteriologist named Hans Christian Gram. He developed it to help differentiate between different types of bacteria based on whether or not their cells would accept a purple dye. Those that do accept the purple dye are called gram-positive, and those that don't accept the purple dye are called gram-negative. Gram-negative infections are by far the most common in the saltwater hobby, but nitrifying bacteria are also gram-negative, so a lot of those antibiotics will actually kill your biofilter. The first is EM erythromycin. It's a broad spectrum. It is considered reef and biofilter safe when used in moderation and not too much. The second one is API General Cure. Number 3 is API Melifix and Pimafix. These are all natural and homeopathic. You can combine them together. It's considered broad spectrum. It's biofilter and reef safe, so a good option for your display tank. And number 4 is Seachem Metroplex, Canoplex. The Seachem Metroplex is gram-negative. The Seachem Canoplex is a broad spectrum. It's biofilter safe and only considered reef safe when you combine it with Seachem Focus. We're on antifungal medications. The first is API Melifix and Pimafix. I'm not going to talk about them. We just talked about them. The second is Cordon Malachite Green. It's more harsh than methylene blue. It's often combined with formalin. It's biofilter safe at low doses, but it's not reef safe. The third is methylene blue. It's better tolerated than malachite green. It is not biofilter safe, and it is not reef safe. Morning, how are you? Obviously, preventing fish disease is way better than trying to treat fish that's already sick. So let's talk how to prevent fish disease. Number 1 is a quarantine tank. Use a quarantine tank. It's by far the best method. As a preventative measure, although it's not a cure, you can use a dip like the Blue Life Safety Stop. It can help remove external parasites, but it's certainly not going to cure a fish that's already sick. Number 3 is keep stable water parameters. If your parameters are changing quickly, it will stress fish out. Number 4 is remove aggressive fish. If you add new fish and all of a sudden they're being attacked, remove the aggressive fish. Number 5, do a lengthy drip acclimation process, and certainly don't just throw your fish in the tank. Number 6, I like to use the MD quarantine box. It gives the new inhabitants a chance to see inside the tank without actually being pestered by fish. Number 7 is use Dr. Tim's First Defense. It's loaded with vitamins and immunosuppressants that will help your fish remain calm. Number 8, and I can't stress it enough, don't overstock. I know you might want a ton of fish in your tank, but if you have a 20 or 30 gallon tank, you're really not going to be able to have any more than 3, 4, maybe 5 small fish. Number 9, add fish slowly. If you just cycled your tank and then just load fish in there, you might trigger another cycle and the ammonia might go through the roof. So add a few fish at a time, that way the biological filter can catch up. And number 10, buy community fish. Don't buy aggressive fish. Don't buy fish that are gonna get too big for your small tank. If you buy peaceful community fish, there's a much greater chance everyone will get along. I didn't mean to break that. This is my medical chest. I think it's a really smart decision for every single beginner to have a medical chest with certain medications on hand just in case. Because if your fish was to get sick, you have to act immediately to even have a chance that those fish will survive. But I keep antiparasitics and antibiotics on hand, and these are just the ones I use. Let's start with the antiparasitics that I keep on hand. The first is Ruby Reef Rally and Kick Ick. I actually need to buy more of the Kick Ick. I love these because they are reef safe and biofilter safe, so I can use them in my current quarantine setup. The next is Mardel Quick Cure. Would never ever have a medical chest without Hikari PraziPro. Cupramine is the gold standard when treating velvet and ick. I actually don't have a system that I can currently use this in, but I still have it on hand just in case. These are the antibiotics I keep on hand. My 2 primary antibiotics are Canaplex and Metroplex. I also have Hikari's Bifurin Plus, just another broad spectrum antibiotic. Probably think the best one to keep is API General Cure because it's both an antibiotic and it also has praziquantel is the primary ingredient in PraziPro. So it treats both external parasites like flukes and it's a broad spectrum antibiotic. And lastly, even though this isn't an antibiotic, I always keep some C-Chem Prime on hand just in case you have an emergency situation where your ammonia gets out of hand. The moral of the story is it's a wise decision to have certain antiparasitics and antibiotics on hand just in case your fish gets sick. You have it, you can treat immediately and give your livestock the best chance of survival. The most common fish question I always get is how many fish can I put in my tank? And there's an old adage that says you can put 1 inch of saltwater fish per 5 gallons. And why there's some truth to that, it really depends on a lot of factors. The first factor is the size and shape of the tank. If it's a 10-gallon tank but super tall, there might not be enough surface area to keep it oxygenated. But if it's a 10-gallon lagoon-style tank that's much wider, you might be able to put more in. The second factor is the size of your return pump. If you have a small return pump that's only turning over your water column, let's say 5 times an hour, or you have a much bigger return pump that turns over the water column 15 times an hour, there's a huge difference in filtration power. And obviously, the more you're turning your water column over, the more filtration that's happening. The third factor is the size and the type of your filtration. For example, do you have a protein skimmer? Is it overpowered for your system? Do you have a lot of live rock? Have you added extra biomedia or ceramic media? Are you doing carbon dosing? The more filtration you have, the more fish you can likely hold. The fourth consideration is where in the water column the fish live. For example, if you have fish that live in the substrate, some that live in the rocks, and some that swim freely in the water column, you're going to be able to hold a few more because those fish aren't going to be fighting. But if you get only fish that live in the water column or only fish that live in the substrate, you're going to overload that one section. And the fifth consideration is the aggressivity of the fish. If you get all peaceful fish, you can generally have more because they'll live well together. But if you have some semi-aggressive fish, let's say clownfish or damselfish, oftentimes in a small tank you just can't have that many. Drip acclimation. Why we do it is because the water parameters at your local fish store are going to be different than the water parameters at home. We want to gradually acclimate those new fish to their new home. If you were to just take those fish and plop them in your display tank, it might shock their system, and that could lead to stress. Stress leads to fish disease leads to fish death. So what we want to do is we want to gradually acclimate them to the change in water parameters. A lot of beginners have this question that is, do I just need to drip acclimate fish? What about my inverts? What about corals? And you'll see a lot of hobbyists out there don't use best practices. They only drip acclimate fish or corals. And yeah, of course, sometimes if you do that, they're going to survive. But best practice says every single piece of livestock you get needs to be drip acclimated. So what do I use for drip acclimation? The first tool I use is a bucket. The second thing I use is the innovative marine AccuDrip. Next up, I use Dr. Tim's First Defense. The last thing in the toolbox is just a net to catch the fish. So how do you do drip acclimation? Well, it's a process that takes about an hour. So what you do is as soon as you bring your livestock home, they're usually in these plastic bags, you take those plastic bags and you rinse them off with fresh water. Next is you float those bags in the display tank. And what that does is it equalizes the water temperature between your display tank and the water from your local fish store. The next step is to grab a pair of scissors, just cut the tops off the bags and gently dump the inhabitants into your bucket. At this point in your bucket, the only water that's in there is local fish store water. The next step is to use the innovative marine AccuDrip to do the drip portion of drip acclimation. Just take the hooked end, put it into your display tank, and put the other end in your bucket. Then use that little medical adjustment valve so that you get 2 to 3 drops per second. I like to allow this process to continue for about 30 minutes. During this process, I like to take the Dr. Tim's First Defense and put a tiny bit in the bucket. And I also take the opportunity to add the First Defense to the display tank. The next step is to set up your acclimation box. Now, if you're setting up a tank for the first time, you probably don't need the acclimation box because there's no other livestock in the tank that can harass the new members. But if you're adding fish in at a later time, or let's say you're adding clownfish and an anemone in and you want them to pair, then I would use the acclimation box. I typically use a net to catch the fish, but if the fish are really sensitive or if they have spines on them that can get caught in the net, then I just use one of those purple gloves and I gently pick them up with my hand and transfer them to the tank. During this process, you just want to be as careful as you can so that you don't add any of that local fish store water into your tank. That local fish store water could have parasites, medication, or bacteria that you don't want in your tank. Be sure that before you move the fish into the display tank that you turn the lights off and leave them off for about 24 hours so that the fish have time to acclimate and they feel safe and can find places to hide. What is a quarantine tank? A quarantine tank is a separate tank from your display tank that you can put your fish in for a period of 3 weeks or longer if they're sick. A quarantine tank is going to be a lot easier to administer medications, and you'll also be able to spot disease and treat it before that disease enters your display tank. Because once it's in your display tank, it could wipe out everything that you've spent years building. The vast majority of hobbyists don't use a quarantine tank. That's a bad choice. It is. When I was a beginner, did I use a quarantine tank? No, I didn't, and that was a terrible choice. Some people are super lucky. I mean, if you're gonna add livestock into a brand new tank, then you might not need a quarantine tank because that tank is basically a quarantine in itself. So do yourself a favor and use a quarantine tank. Yes, it is a little bit more money, but you're not setting up a second display tank. A quarantine tank is bare bone. So what are the essential items of a quarantine tank? 10 or 20 gallon tank, a heater, a hang on the back, power filter, and pieces of PVC for hiding places. That's pretty much it. You can set up a quarantine tank for less than $100. So how do you quarantine? Well, you follow the drip acclimation procedures. Then you leave the fish in the quarantine tank for a minimum of 3 weeks. If after 3 weeks they don't show any sign of disease, you should be good to go. You can move the fish from your quarantine tank to your display tank. But if at any time a fish shows a sign of disease, you have to restart that clock. Check out my beginner guide to saltwater fish disease and my beginner guide to saltwater fish medications, and they will point you down the right path of what to use to treat. If you still have questions, there are many forums out there. You can email me, you can speak to Marine Depot. Another lengthy episode is done. For any of the items we used in this video, just see the description below. You can buy all of them at Marine Depot. And for those beginner guides, the beginner guide to saltwater fish, the beginner guide to saltwater fish disease, and the beginner guide to saltwater fish medication, as well as a detailed video on how to set up a quarantine tank, go to myfirstfishtank.com. Coming up next week, episode 6 of 10, we're going to be talking about corals and cleanup crews. Until then, happy reefing, everybody.